Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainable Activism Webinar. Today, our special guest is Jennifer Blough, and she'll be with us in just a moment. We had a few technical difficulties, so thank you for your patience. My name is Lisa Levinson. I'm the director of the Sustainable Activism Campaign, and we provide emotional and spiritual tools for animal activists. And this webinar is a big part of that, and we're super excited to have Jennifer with us today. She's a compassion fatigue therapist, and she's written a book. Actually, I have it right here, To Save a Starfish, and it's all about how to combat compassion fatigue, and she'll be sharing parts of that with us this evening. I have a couple of announcements, and one of them is that our organization in defense of animals, we are hosting a vegan spirituality retreat that will be happening this weekend in Philadelphia. So if you are in the Philly area, I hope you can join us. I put a little link in the chat box there to the website, which is idausa.org/retreats. It's a lovely opportunity to do some self-care, which we all need so badly. We have yoga, meditation. We do a walk in the woods. We also have a speaker, international peace activist who's also vegan, Peter Jam, and a wonderful organization called Mantra Lounge is going to provide the yoga and also help us get into that vibe of deep relaxation, and they'll be providing some nutritious and delicious vegan food for us. So I hope that some of you will check that out, and if not, let us know if you'd like to do a retreat in your area. And anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and announce Jennifer, and she'll be with us shortly. See here, we had a little technical issue, so she logged off and is going to log back on just to give you guys a little update. So I'm going to read her bio while we're getting prepared. So Jennifer Blough, she MA LLCP, is a professional counselor, certified compassion fatigue therapist, and pet loss grief recovery therapist who counsels individuals and groups on animal welfare and mental health topics. She's a vegan and has an extensive background in animal welfare, including work in shelters and animal control. She also offers workshops and retreats for professionals and volunteers in animal-related fields. She owns Deepwater Counseling in Southeast Michigan. Jennifer is also the author of the book, To Save a Starfish, which I showed you, a compassion fatigue workbook for the animal welfare warrior, which is available through Amazon. And in the workbook, folks will learn symptoms of compassion fatigue and the risk factors for developing it, and also to understand the human-animal relationship. Folks will discover how to practice mindfulness, to meditate, to use progressive muscle relaxation techniques, and massage therapy to calm the mind and body. The book will also help you tweak your thought processes and communicate in a healthy way while creating limits. The book includes tips on using nutrition, physical activity, and rest to combat compassion fatigue. If you need counseling or group support, the book also guides you in the right direction. So her website is deepwatermichigan.com, and you can also sign up for Jennifer's e-newsletter to find out about more resources for handling compassion fatigue. And you can reach her at jennifer@deepwatermichigan.com. Jennifer lives with her husband and her 3 rescue babies, 3 dogs, 2 rabbits, 2 mice, and and their rescue babies. There's more than 3. 3 dogs, 2 rabbits, 2 mice, and 1 parrot. So it's really a treat to have Jennifer with us. So let me see if we can get her on here. Let's see. So, Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Oh, my goodness. I am so sorry.
Oh, well, we've got you now. We've got your voice, which is fabulous. So let's see. Were you able to get onto the computer as well?
No, I'm on the phone.
Okay, so we've had some technical issues. What we'll do is I have the presentation. So I will go ahead and be your eyes here, and I'll go ahead and move the slide for you. And so I'll pull them up, and then we can go ahead and I'll talk you through it.
All right.
So we have Jennifer Blough with us. And for those of you on the phone, you won't notice any difference because we have her lovely voice. And if you're online, you will see her slides. You may not see her face at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and open this presentation for you. So it's loading right now. And for those folks, I'll do one more little announcement. I'm going to be the tech person on the call, trying to work out any issues. If you can communicate with both of us actually via the chat box. That's my job. I'll be monitoring that if you can't hear or have any other things you'd like to say. And also you can communicate with each other that way. That's kind of fun if you're online. And if you are, if you're able to see the webinar, in the upper right-hand corner of the webinar, there's a little sort of a place you can hover, and then you'll see a little icon that says maximize. If you would like to have this presentation be larger on your screen, you can click the maximize button, and then you can see it better. Another option is you can download the presentation to your computer and listen to us, which there's a downloadable link in the chat box right now. So I just want to give you some different options so you have the presentation large enough for you to see. Okay, so Jennifer, if you're ready, we've got the first panel up, which is the title of the presentation, which is Combating Compassion Fatigue and Animal Welfare. And I have read through your bio, but it'd be lovely to hear what you'd like to do next. Let me know when you want to do the next slide. I'll go ahead and push it.
Okay, actually I have access, so maybe I can try that.
Oh, sure, fabulous.
Okay, so sorry everyone, we were doing fine for about 20-25 minutes, and then something went kaput. So as Lisa mentioned, my name is Jennifer Blough, and I am a professional counselor and certified compassion fatigue therapist. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about my own journey through compassion fatigue and kind of how I got to where I am today. So I first became involved in animal rights when I was just about 10 years old. My grandmother, very progressive grandmother, was a vegetarian at the time, and also an animal rights activist. And so I probably attended my first protest when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And so, in my own little egocentric, childish ways, I thought that, okay, I'm giving up meat, I'm going to protest, I'm doing my part, and all is good with the world. Well, it wasn't until I got a little bit older and I became vegan, and I started to really research what was going on in factory farming. I started to research what was going on in circuses and puppy mills and laboratories that test on animals. And the more I got into the movement, the more depressed I got, the more anxious I got. I started to have nightmares when I could sleep. I had a lot of trouble sleeping, but when I could sleep, I had nightmares. I had flashbacks of things I saw. And then later on, I became more involved in animal welfare, and I began working at a shelter. I later worked as an animal control officer, and so that was a whole new dimension of compassion fatigue, but I didn't know what compassion fatigue was. I didn't know there was a name for what I was going through. As a matter of fact, I thought it was me. I thought that I was weak. I thought that I was flawed. I thought, gosh, maybe I'm not cut out to do this. or maybe I just react differently than everyone else. I thought everyone else was stronger than me, and there was something wrong with me. And so it wasn't until I went back to graduate school to pursue psychology, we started learning about compassion fatigue, because compassion fatigue is something that therapists can struggle with. And I said, wait a minute, this is what I had been going through all those years. I was too sensitive. I was, too compassionate. I was too this, too that. And no, you know what? I was normal. And so as I went through graduate school and I started to learn more and more about compassion fatigue and grief and animal welfare and topics like that, when I graduated, I said, that's it. I'm going to now go back and devote my life and my practice to helping those who are in the animal welfare and in the animal rights movement. Because, back then we weren't talking about it, and I was suffering in silence, and now I know that there were so many other people that were suffering in silence too. And so my mission now is to help animals by helping the animal caregiver, by helping the animal activist. And so I want to talk to you a little bit tonight about compassion fatigue, and some of you guys know exactly what that is. Maybe some of you know what you're struggling with, but you didn't realize that there was a name for it. So I want to kind of give you a little overview of what compassion fatigue is. So the term compassion fatigue was coined by traumacologist Charles Figley, and I believe it was the early to mid-90s that he kind of coined that term, and he described it as the cost of caring for people and animals that are suffering or have been traumatized. And they really began to start researching trauma nurses. And they were realizing that trauma nurses were exposed to so much trauma that they were starting to really identify with it, and they were starting to display the same symptoms of the people that they were treating. So then they started kind of branching out, maybe police officers get this, maybe firefighters get this. And then down the road, and those animal people too, right? And so animal welfare and animal rights folks have finally, we're finally on the map, and people are finally realizing that this is a serious problem. And researchers who have studied this population say that animal caregivers are the most pain-saturated people we have ever met. And I agree with that. But I just want you to know, again, that compassion fatigue, it's normal. It's a natural consequence of helping others. And, there's no helping profession that's immune to this. Okay, so you think about the police officers, the firefighters, the trauma therapists, and, of course, animal welfare workers and activists. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? So we, day in and day out, we have this kind of chronic long-term exposure to things such as abuse, neglect. If you're maybe working as a veterinarian or an animal shelter technician, you're exposed to euthanasia. You're exposed to a lot of grief. And this can be anything from a veterinarian losing a patient to an activist who sees the impact of factory farming. And I mean, you talk about grief. That's grief on a huge scale, right? Pet overpopulation, the problem with that, and that can really start taking a heavy toll on people that care the most. So let's talk about some symptoms of compassion fatigue. Now, this is a pretty extensive list. I don't want you to, be frightened by this very long list, but these are just some things to look out for, okay? So I mentioned that one of my kind of first signs with compassion fatigue was depression. And I've been diagnosed with depression. I've kind of fought it my whole life. And I know that it's directly related to compassion fatigue. So there could be feelings of sadness, insomnia, which is basically where you have trouble sleeping. It can also be hypersomnia, where you just sleep too much. You come home, you veg out in front of the TV, and then you sleep for 12 hours because you don't want to deal with reality, right? As I mentioned before, nightmares, low energy. You feel like you just drag yourself around all day. This was one of my favorite symptoms when I worked in an animal shelter, anger. Oh my goodness. I was angry all the time. I became really jaded. My world view changed. I thought that, everyone surrendered their animals and, nobody cared and this and that, and I became very irritable. Grief is often a topic that is overlooked in this type of work. And again, I mentioned, the veterinarian who loses his or her patient. If you think about it, compared to their human counterparts, veterinarians and their staffs lose their patients at a rate of 5 times that of a human doctor. So there's going to be grief there. We get connected. We bond with our patients. We bond with the animals in our care. And so when we lose them, we're going to go through some grief. And that's normal. Again, it's normal. Social isolation, that's another symptom of compassion fatigue. If sometimes these things aren't really understood by mainstream society. You can't come home and sit at the dinner table and talk about the video you just saw about how, geese are plucked while alive to make pillows. People don't want to hear that, right? And so sometimes you start to kind of isolate yourself because you feel that no one else gets you. You feel like no one understands, and so you start to shut up and you start to withdraw. Your appetite might change. Maybe you feel like you just don't have the appetite. You just don't want to eat. Maybe you turn to food. Maybe you stress eat. When I write about this in the book, that when I was working in an animal shelter, I lived on a steady diet of Fritos, Coca-Cola, and Advil. That talk about a terrible diet. It was vegan, but it was I wasn't fueling my body properly. And we'll talk a little bit later in this presentation on some small steps that you can make to make sure that you stay resilient so you can keep fighting this. Another thing that's common with compassion fatigue is a loss of interest, right? So maybe things that once brought us pleasure, hanging out with friends or going to the movies or engaging in sports activities or hobbies, we just kind of lose the ability to have fun. And they say, Charles Figney, mentions that one of the first signs that you have compassion fatigue is losing your sense of humor, okay? So if you lose your sense of humor, that's a wake-up call, okay? So let's talk about a few more symptoms. Relationship conflicts are common. Now, this can be conflicts with you and your significant other, okay? This can be conflicts with your family members, your friends, your coworkers, even colleagues within the animal welfare and rights community. You can start having some conflicts come up. Hypervigilance is another one. Now, when you hear the word hypervigilance, people think about returning vets with PTSD, okay? The story of a firecracker goes off and the vet kind of hits the deck. He's become really hypersensitive to things like that. When you have compassion fatigue, you can also become very hypersensitive to things. Feelings of guilt, that's another one. I really struggled with this one. I still do to some extent. I felt guilty taking time out to care for myself because I thought, well, every minute that I care for myself, whether it's take a trip, whether it's go out to dinner, have fun. Whenever I cared for myself, I felt like that's time away from saving animals, and I felt guilty about it. What I didn't realize is that guilt fueled the compassion fatigue. Now, a sign that you're struggling with severe compassion fatigue, and I'm sure you guys know people, you've worked with people, they just walk around like a zombie. I mean, they're zoned out. And you wonder, my God, do they have any compassion? That is severe compassion fatigue. When you basically lose your compassion, you've basically checked out, okay? This is along the same lines that those feelings of emptiness, okay? Feeling like you have nothing left to give. You're just this empty vessel, okay? You can start to have work-related problems, so maybe you start chronically showing up late to work, you cut out early, you start to cut corners at work, you're having, problems with your boss or problems with customers. Those can all be kind of indicative of compassion fatigue. Anxiety, too. Anxiety can manifest itself in several ways. So we have mental anxiety, so this could be kind of constant worrying and having a lot of intrusive thoughts. It can also be physical anxiety. So, for example, if you notice that your heart's beating faster or your breathing is shallow or you're shaking, that can be a sign of physical anxiety. I know for me that when I get really stressed out, I'll notice that I stop breathing, and all of a sudden I gasp for air. And I say, okay, Jen, it's time to check in with yourself. That's a symptom for me that I'm really stressed out. Another really common thing I see with people that work with animals is low self-esteem, right? So our self-esteem is sometimes almost connected to what we do for animals, okay? So when there's a victory, we sign petitions and we go to protests, and when we get a victory, our self-esteem goes up. Maybe we're foster parents, and when that, special needs pit bull gets adopted, our self-esteem skyrockets, right? But let's say we're a veterinarian and we lose a patient, or we work at a shelter and we have to put an animal to sleep, our self-esteem tanks. And so our self-esteem, our self-worth is so connected to this passion of ours. And another symptom is poor concentration. We might find that we're really distracted easily. We have a hard time making decisions. We're just not thinking straight. Then we can have some bodily complaints. For me, it was headaches. Headaches and stomach aches were basically my cue that I need to really start working on some self-care. For you, maybe it's tense muscles. You got to listen to your body. It's trying to tell you something. Then we talked a bit about this too, intrusive thoughts, okay? So when I first started doing my research, the internet was in its infancy, and so I was able to now see these undercover videos, and I was able to educate myself that way. And there were nights I just couldn't sleep. I was traumatized. Basically, it's traumatizing. And I'm sure a lot of you who are out there doing this, you know what I mean. And so those videos, those images would come flooding into my mind, and it became a real problem. And you start to feel hopeless. For every animal you save, there's thousands more. For every victory, there's thousands of more fights, and sometimes you start to feel hopeless, like, gosh, am I making an impact at all? And then, of course, we talked about the sense of humor. Unhealthy coping skills, that's another big one. So if you find that when you're getting stressed out, you're turning to drugs or alcohol or unsafe sex or compulsive spending, things like that, those unhealthy coping skills, that's a sign that you're suppressing something, and you need to deal with it. And last but not least, suicidal thoughts. This is more common than you may realize. Recent research has shown that 1 in 6 veterinarians has considered taking their lives, and we have recently lost a few veterinarians. The top-rated occupation for suicide rates in the United States are animal control officers. They have the highest suicide rate, along with police officers and firefighters. But we hear about the police officers and the firefighters, right? We don't hear about the animal control officers. They don't get the same support that the cops and the firefighters do, and I'm hoping that changes, because this is a real problem in this field, our suicidal thoughts. So again, I just want you, if you take away one thing from this webinar, it's that compassion fatigue is just a set of symptoms. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a character flaw. You're not mentally ill. It's totally normal. They say that the more susceptible you are to compassion fatigue, the more the more you care. And so again, and don't think of compassion fatigue as a dichotomous thing. It's not a black or white issue. It's not like, okay, you have it or you don't. It's to what degree do I have it? Okay, so think about it in the gray area. For myself, compassion fatigue is always there. So sometimes it just sits simmering quietly on the back burner, okay? And then other times it boils over, okay? So it's normal. It doesn't just go away, okay? It's about managing it. And so a little bit later we'll talk about some things that you can do to help manage it. But for now, I'd like to talk about what are some things that cause compassion fatigue, right? So personality and temperament is going to play a role. This is kind of obvious, right? So high levels of having empathy and compassion are definitely going to contribute to having compassion fatigue, really. So if you don't have compassion, obviously you're not going to get compassion fatigue. So that has to be in place. Now, the difference between empathy and compassion is that basically empathy is the ability to put yourself in another's quote-unquote shoes. Passion is taking that empathy and putting it into action, okay? So it's the difference in saying, oh gosh, that poor cow, and then putting that into action is, okay, well, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to become a vegan, or I'm going to go to a protest, or I'm going to sign petitions, or I'm going to raise money and support, organizations such as IDA that work to put an end to factory farming. So that's taking empathy and putting it into action. Another problem that a lot of us have is we are very other-directed. So we tend to put others' needs ahead of our own, okay? The animals come first. When I was working in animal welfare, I would spend, 8, 9, 10 hours a day at the shelter taking care of animals. Then I'd come home and I'd have my own animals, and I'd have my own foster animals that I would take care of. And so basically, we are, first of all, we are on the clock 24/7. Most of us don't go home. We don't clock out and go home and put this all behind us. We go home, and the activism, it's a calling. It's not just a career or a hobby. It's a lifestyle, okay? And then finally, highly sensitive. Having a highly sensitive personality is also going to contribute to compassion fatigue. The more sensitive you are, probably the more empathic you're going to be. And so highly sensitive people can be pretty vulnerable to compassion fatigue. We also know that having an exposure to trauma is going to contribute to compassion fatigue. So having a history of personal trauma in your life, sometimes that can kind of be stirred up, okay? Now, when we talk about trauma, there's a couple types of trauma. So we have primary trauma. Primary trauma is trauma that happens to you, okay? So maybe it was child abuse. Maybe it was a sexual assault. Maybe it was a bad car accident, okay? Secondary trauma is trauma that you witness in others. So the trauma that happens in factory farms, in puppy mills, in laboratories. When you're exposed to that trauma, it's called secondary trauma. Now, according to Charles Figley, again, the man that coined the term compassion fatigue, this is identical to secondary stress disorder and the equivalent to PTSD. Okay, so you probably noticed, if you know anything about PTSD, you probably saw a lot of the same symptoms with compassion fatigue. Okay. Now, people often ask me, well, gosh, is compassion fatigue the same as burnout? Yes and no. Okay, so if you think about it, anyone can burn out. Okay, plumbers, CEOs, stockbrokers, okay, anyone can burn out from their job. When you add compassion into the mix, when you add caring for people or animals, that's when you're at risk for compassion fatigue. Now, we risk compassion fatigue and burnout if we have a toxic work environment. Okay, that's going to add to burnout. When we feel like we have a lack of control, so maybe you have no control over your schedule. I remember when I was an animal control officer, I was on call for many nights in a row, and so there was very little control in my own schedule there. Having a poor support system, okay, so maybe there's a lot of office or organizational politics. Maybe there's an office bully. Not having that support system in place is going to not only contribute to compassion fatigue, but it's going to contribute to that isolation that we talked about before. And not enough balance, okay, that contributes to compassion fatigue and burnout. And so I want to talk more about putting that balance back into your life in order to build resilience. So how is compassion fatigue affecting you? Okay, you probably got a pretty good idea when you were looking at those symptoms, and I'm sure you recognize some of them in yourself. There's also some self-assessments that you can take, and the standard in the field is called the Professional Quality of Life Scale, or the ProQual. This is going to measure the positive and negative effects of helping others that are suffering or have been traumatized. This scale is going to measure compassion fatigue, burnout, and compassion satisfaction. So basically, the joy that you get from your work. You can find this at proqual.org, and for those of you who can't see the slides, that is proquol.org. Now, when you take this test, you're going to have to substitute. They weren't thinking of the animal community when they made this test, so it talks about people. So you're going to want to substitute that with the word animals, and see where you score on your level of compassion fatigue, burnout, and compassion satisfaction. That's a good place, a good self-assessment. So now let's talk a little bit about how we can prevent or manage compassion fatigue with self-care. Self-care is one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle when it comes to managing compassion fatigue. So one of the really important things that you want to do is make sure that you are getting adequate sleep. The brain and the body repairs itself during sleep, okay? So if you are not sleeping properly, you're not basically fixing your brain, okay? It's like cleaning out your computer. You got to do this every so often to get rid of all the junk. So here's just a couple tips on getting some good sleep, which is going to really help to build some resiliency and take care of yourself. So you want to try to establish a sleep schedule. People hate it when I say this, but you really want to try to go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time every morning if you can, okay? Try not to nap. I had a client once who said, well, I can't sleep at night. I said, well, okay, do you nap during the day? And she said, yeah. I said, well, how long? She said, well, about 3 hours. Okay, if you have to nap, first of all, that's indicative of not getting enough sleep. Second of all, if you do have to nap, try to keep it under 30 minutes so you're not up at night. You're also going to want to avoid alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine 6 hours before bedtime. Now, I want to say a word about alcohol and caffeine. So if you find that you struggle with depression, you are going to want to avoid alcohol altogether because alcohol basically acts as a depressant in the brain. Caffeine, on the other hand, if you struggle with anxiety, caffeine acts as a natural stimulant and is going to make that anxiety worse, okay? Now, you're definitely going to want to exercise every day, okay? Exercising for at least 30 minutes a day is going to boost your mood. It's going to build resiliency. It's going to reduce stress. Even walking for 30 minutes a day, and you can do this in one long stretch or you can break it up into 3 chunks. What we know about just moderate walking is it has such powerful effects on the brain. So, of course, it's good for you physically, right? But what we know is it acts as a natural antidepressant in the brain. It releases those feel-good chemicals, and it reduces those stress hormones. So if anything, try to get out there and take a walk, even if you just start off with 10 minutes. If you do it outside, you're going to get the added bonus of vitamin D from the sun, which also helps with depression, and reconnecting with nature, we know is also a mood booster, okay? You might try to take a warm shower or a bath before bedtime if that helps you to relax. You're going to want to keep your room cool, dark, and quiet, okay? And people hate me when I say this, the cell phone's got to go, okay? You're going to want to turn off all the electronics. If you're on Facebook or you're on, your iPad or your laptop right up until bedtime, your brain is stimulated, okay? And it takes a long time to shut down after you turn off those electronics. So give yourself plenty of time, okay? So now let's talk a little bit about diet. What we know, we found out recently, so we have neurotransmitters in our brain, okay? And neurotransmitters are what's going to affect our mood. What we now know is that there are a lot of neurotransmitters in the gut, okay? So we're finding this direct link between depression, things like depression and anxiety, and the diet, what we're putting in our guts. So it makes sense, right? So again, we talked about limiting alcohol and caffeine, especially with depression and anxiety. You're also going to want to really cut down on sugar and simple carbs. Now, those are 2 things that most people associate with comfort food, but really they act just the opposite in the body. So if you are really struggling with compassion fatigue and you want to reach for a donut or you want to reach for, the Fritos and pop like I did, that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. Instead, you want to start adding some healthy mood-boosting foods into your diet, such as leafy greens, sweet potatoes, or other things high in beta-carotene are really good for depression. So think sweet potatoes, pumpkin, apricots, things like that. Oats are very good. Berries, any kind of berries, especially blueberries, strawberries, anything like that. Nuts and seeds are going to be high in vitamin E, which also helps to battle depression. One of the star nuts is going to be walnuts. Avocados, those are going to give you some amazing omega-3s that are going to really help to kind of balance the brain. Instead of drinking soda pop or coffee, try water and herbal teas, especially the decaffeinated kind. And then fruit and veggie smoothies. Make a fruit veggie smoothie in the morning, take it to work, put it in the fridge around 2 o'clock. When you feel like taking a nap, take a brisk walk and drink a smoothie. We talked a little bit about exercise. Again, I just want to kind of reiterate that, exercise is really going to release those feel-good hormones, and it's going to really help, especially if you're battling depression and anxiety or just overall compassion fatigue and burnout. If walking isn't your thing, fine. Find something that you love to do, shoot hoops, go jogging, do yoga. I love walking because my 3 dogs enjoy it. So that's how I get in my walk every day. But just try to get in some exercise every single day. Now, a note about exercise, if you're struggling with insomnia, you have a real hard time falling asleep, do this exercise in the morning. It should help. by the end of the day to help you sleep. Now, you want to exercise the body, but of course you want to give the brain a good workout too. And you want to practice self-care with relaxation techniques, okay? So there's a variety of things you can do. Different things work for different people. There's deep breathing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Meditation, you don't have to be an expert at meditation. There's a lot of apps that you can download to help you meditate, guided meditation. Massage therapy. If you can get a massage once a week, once a month even, what that's going to do is it's going to work out all those negative toxins that have built up in the muscles. That's what happens when we're stressed. Our muscles basically collect all this negative energy and these toxins. And so massage therapy is going to release all those toxins. Yoga is another great thing, especially if you're dealing with trauma. We know that yoga has been very helpful for people dealing with trauma and PTSD. Stretching, if you just get up from your desk a couple times a day and just do some basic stretching, that's going to help bring your body back in balance. Guided imagery, again, there's apps you can get on your phone or your computer that'll guide you through mindfulness exercises or meditation exercises. So you don't have to be an expert, and it doesn't have to be difficult. And then progressive muscle relaxation. This is one of my favorites because I often have a lot of tension in my body, and so progressive muscle relaxation really helps me to kind of de-stress and unwind, especially before bedtime. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to kind of take you through one of these exercises. I want to take you through a mindful deep breathing exercise. Now, this is one of the very first things that I teach most of my clients that are dealing with depression and anxiety and trauma and PTSD and compassion fatigue and grief. And basically, mindful deep breathing is so helpful for so many issues. So I'd like to take you through an exercise. So what I'd like everyone to do, I'd like you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that. I want you to close your eyes. And what I want you to do is I want you to first put a hand on your chest and put the other hand on your stomach. And I'd like you to put this in the chat box if you don't mind. So take a deep breath in. And if you notice that the breath rises through your stomach first, type in stomach. If your chest is rising first, I want you to put in chest. Take a couple moments. Okay, we got a chest breather. Who else? I know we have more chest breathers out there. Oh, we got a tummy. Good. Okay. So you can put your hands down now. So I want to explain why this is so important. You say, well, I'm breathing. What does it matter, right? Actually, it matters a lot. So we used to think that we could not control the nervous system and its reactions. We now know that this is not true. We have complete control over the nervous system. So if you think about it, if you're breathing in through your chest, your breath is going to be a lot more shallow, okay, simply by the fact that you're breathing in through your chest. So the autonomic nervous system goes, whoa, wait a minute, we're breathing shallow, we must be in danger. And so other things start to happen. Other stress responses kind of go into action. So when we start breathing through our stomach, the brain goes, oh, okay, I've been given the all clear signal. I can relax. I can settle down. So by learning to breathe through your stomach in a mindful way, you are basically going to trigger the relaxation response in your brain. Okay, so this is a way that you can kind of snap yourself out of stress right away. So, okay, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to take in a nice deep breath. And as we do this exercise, I just want you to stay in the moment. Basically what that means is if any thoughts come to your mind, just notice those thoughts. Don't judge them, just notice. And then gently bring your awareness back to your breathing. Pay attention to how the breath feels as you breathe in and out. Notice that sensation of the breath coming in through the nose, how it feels on the back of the throat, how it fills the stomach and rises up to the chest cavity. And then as you breathe out, really notice how it feels as the breath leaves your chest and then the stomach. Notice how your body feels against the chair you're sitting in, or maybe you're lying down. Just really notice how your body feels. Notice how your feet feel planted against the earth. Again, if anything comes up for you, any thoughts, any emotions, just notice them and then gently bring your mind back to your breathing. You might start to hear certain sounds that you didn't notice before. Don't judge those sounds, just notice them. Maybe you hear a ticking clock. Maybe you hear barking dogs. Maybe you hear a car going by. Just notice all these sounds that you hear, and without judgment, just bring it back to your breathing. Now I want you to try to slow down your breath just a bit further. Some people find it helpful to imagine the breath coming in and going out like a wave. And if you have thoughts that keep entering your head, maybe you want to notice those thoughts as clouds just going by. So there's a thought, and there it goes. I want you to really notice the way the air feels on your skin. Maybe it's a little warm, maybe it's a little cool. Don't judge the way it feels, just simply notice it and describe it, and then gently bring your mind back to your breathing. Now I just want you to slow down that breath just a little bit further. There's no right or wrong way to do this, just that you try to slow the breath down a bit further. You may even want to count to 3 with each inhalation and exhalation. So you slowly count in, 1, 2, 3. Slowly count out, 2, 3. Now I'm going to count down from 5 to 1. And when I hit 1, I want you to open your eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to open your eyes and come back to the here and now. Now this breathing exercise, again, this is just one example of something that you can do almost anywhere. Okay, so I tell people, I give workshops at shelters, and I say, you know what, sneak away to the bathroom for 10 minutes. You know, for customers driving you crazy, sneak away for 10 minutes. Go to your car, take a lunch break. Do some deep breathing. If you just do this 10 minutes a day, that's 10 minutes that you spend on yourself, okay? That's 10 minutes that you can give the activist in you a break. Trying to do this 24/7 is like trying to drive your car without gas. You got to put gas in the car. You got to recharge the batteries. And so think of exercises like this as a way to charge your battery. Okay? So I want to talk just a little bit about finding some support. So support is the other piece of the puzzle when it comes to managing compassion fatigue. You don't want to get to that point where you're isolating yourself. You want to reach out and find help. And again, as a community, we are so reluctant to reach out and get help because we think we should be strong enough to do this on our own. But we're just one person. We can't do this all on our own. So, find some friends, family, coworkers, colleagues, people that you trust and that you can feel comfortable sharing some of your pain with. Find some of those people and open up to them when you can. Please make use of the IDA helpline and the online support group and the retreats that they offer. You might want to look into some professional counseling. Now, what I recommend for people, because a lot of therapists are familiar with this, but they're not necessarily familiar with the animal welfare and animal rights side of it. So, I've heard some horror stories about therapists that, say, I don't want to hear about this. So if you find a therapist who appears to be traumatized by what you're telling them, walk out the door and find another therapist. So, you might want to look for a therapist that specializes in trauma, okay? They're going to have specialized training that helps them to be able to hold that space for you and to, really understand what you're going through and to be able to listen to you. You might want to try to find a therapist that deals with grief. Again, they are going to be trained and used to hearing really tough stories that you might want to share with them. There's also some Facebook groups out there. I have a LinkedIn group that I just started. It's called Compassion, Fatigue, and Animal Welfare. If you're on LinkedIn, please look me up. I'd love to add you to the group. And, of course, if you are feeling suicidal, please reach out for help immediately, even if you just have to call the suicide hotline. It is 1-800-273-8255. We need you. The animals need you. We need you to be healthy, and we need you to be here. We need you to be alive, okay? And I think someone just asked the name of that LinkedIn group. It is Compassion, Fatigue, and Animal Welfare, in Animal Welfare. It's a private group, so just ask to be added, and I will be happy to add you. And finally, I just want to let everyone know that I have just released a book. It's called To Save a Starfish, a Compassion Fatigue Workbook for the Animal Welfare Warrior. It's now available on Amazon.com. It's available as a print book and also as a Kindle edition. And the reason I wrote this book, there's just a couple books out there dedicated to this. One is written, it's pretty clinical, and then the other one is strictly for veterinarians. And I wanted my book to really address everyone in this community: animal welfare workers, animal rights activists, vegans, everyone that does their part to help animals. And so if you would like to know more about compassion fatigue and you'd like to learn more coping skills and relaxation techniques and self-care techniques, then you will find them in this book. And so that is it for me. If people would like to get a hold of me, my website is deepwatermichigan.com. That's the name of my private practice here is Deepwater Counseling. So you can find me at deepwatermichigan.com, or you can shoot me an email at jennifer@deepwatermichigan.com. And so I'd just like to thank you so much for spending your evening with me and bearing with us through these technical issues. And so now I hand it over to Lisa.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yes, we did this.
We made it.
Fabulous job. This is so amazingly profound. I think the experience that I had, and I think other people had going through the actual guided meditation that you did, the stress reduction technique, that's so helpful just to have that experience of really breathing deeply and noticing ourselves, what happens to our physical sense, how we can relax. Yeah, so that was very helpful. And
you know, if you think about it, you know, our society, our Western society, we are so either focused on the future or the past. You know, we're worrying about the future or we're ruminating about the past. You know, how often are we just in the moment? Not very often. So these exercise really brings us back.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. I gave myself permission to really sink in and feel it, and I think this is something that that's helpful. And there are also guided meditations, I think, on iTunes. If it works better for you, for those of us who like to hear another person's voice as we do meditation.
Absolutely. There's actually one on my website you can get. So again, if you go to deepwatermichigan.com, I recorded I think it's like a 15-minute guided meditation. There's nice soothing music in the back, and all you do is close your eyes and just listen to the sound of my voice, and it kind of guides you through. So, yeah, it's great for beginners too.
Well, thank you for sharing that too. I think you have a special talent for it, so I encourage everyone to check that out because it's nice. It really is kind of soothing to hear your voice. So thank you. Now, we may have some folks who would like to stay on a little longer. I know some people will probably head off after our hour. But if anyone would like to stay on a little further, we can open this conversation up a little more and have questions from our listeners. So what I'll do is I'll change the format of the discussion, and at that point, everyone will hear a little announcement that will tell people how to speak up if they'd like to ask you a question directly.
Okay.
So it'll be just a moment.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Okay, so hopefully everyone heard that if you're on the phone, you can press *6. If you're on the computer with us, then you can unmute yourself. There's a little icon next to your name with a microphone, and you can click that to unmute yourself and ask Jennifer a question. So, and I'll also check the chat box for those of you who would prefer to type in the question. And
hi, Lisa.
Let's see. Hi, please say your name.
Hey, it's Lauren. How are you?
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for chiming in. Good.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say, Jennifer, thank you so much. That webinar is a gift, and it's going to keep on giving because I think we're going to share out the replay link a lot. So thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate you spending this time with us.
It's a pleasure. But thanks. And I wanted to add one more thing, too, that I kind of realized as you were talking was that sometimes we stack our stresses as well. And so there are times in our life that we're more resilient and times in our life that we're less resilient. And that kind of, like, as you were talking, it hit home to me that there have been some times that I've been a lot less resilient, and other times that I have been more resilient. So it's actually been easier to kind of utilize the tools. And so I would encourage people to kind of just be aware of that. And, you know, if you feel you're in a space in your life or a time in your life that you are feeling less resilient, it can be a little harder to access the tools. So reach out to the helpline, reach out to a counselor, and you know, get somebody to hold your hand to just kind of take that first step, because sometimes that's what you need.
Absolutely. And, I always say the best of us get compassion fatigue. None of us are completely immune to this. Like I mentioned in the webinar, there are times when it just sits on the back burner, it's just kind of simmering, in the background, and then, boom, one day it'll just hit me and it just boils over. And, all I have to do is, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to have a husband who gets it. And, I'll just come running in with tears streaming down my face. And he says, "What's wrong?" And I go, "Compassion fatigue." And he just knows to just hold me. Just hold me. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want advice. I just need you to be there. And so it's so important that everyone has someone that they can do that with.
That's so true. And that point about, not always having somebody to fix it. Having somebody to just listen or be there and hold that space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't fix this. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all so important. And also we can tell our supporters, the people in our lives, what we need. When many times they might be trying to fix us, where what we really need is a hug, like you said. I think that's so important to give people the tools to help us, to say, when I'm in this situation, what really helps me is a hug. Or when I'm in this situation, what helps me is just to listen and not say anything at all.
Yeah.
And there will be times that we want advice too, and we can say, now what I need is advice, So being clear with people around us so that they can help us. And I think that's also a great reminder.
Yeah, definitely. And we have to be clear ourselves. What do I need when I'm really struggling with this? So I think that's going to be different for everyone. Some people need to talk it through. Some people need to go hug their dogs. Some people need to go out and socialize, and some people need to be alone. So you really have to figure out, what do you need in these times?
Yes, very good point. That's an excellent piece of self-reflection that will help us to then help give people clues of what we need in our lives. So,
exactly.
Well, thank you, Lauren, for sharing and saying, giving feedback. Really, really appreciate that. Yeah. I'm also wondering if anyone else has a question or a comment or anything you'd like to say.
Yes, hi, this is Kim. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am. Okay, hi, Lisa. I really so much enjoyed the talk. I really got so much out of it, and I feel kind of validated right now. But I was just recently going through a real period of kind of being depressed and irritable, and I felt really kind of angry at friends of mine that I had in the spiritual community who didn't get being vegan at all and all this stuff. I've been vegan maybe for 6 months or so, and I just started feeling, inside of me this anger, how can they have pets that they love so much and they're so spiritual and yet they don't get it. So I think a lot of my fallout has come from, relationships, with people that I'm a very sensitive person, and it kind of takes a lot for me to form good friendships. So it's kind of traumatizing, to feel like all of a sudden this big divide between me and, the people I would call friends. And, it created a lot of tension and anxiety in me. And, so can you address that?
Absolutely. So, just a personal story here. This line of work, I don't really want to call it work, this calling actually was a factor in breaking up my first marriage, which turned out to be a good thing in the end. But when I became, I was vegetarian and he was fine with that, but when I became vegan, there was a divide. And unfortunately with us, it was too big of a divide, and broke us apart. It's really a balancing act. I think a lot of us who are vegans really struggle with, we have people in our lives that we love and we care about, and they're good people. Yet we go over to their house for Thanksgiving dinner and they're chowing down on this turkey. And we don't, I don't get it. We don't get it. And again, you just have to kind of put things into perspective. I think we're all on a different journey. There was a time when I ate turkey. There was a time when I ate eggs and drank milk. And now I'm to the point where I don't even eat honey, okay? But everyone is on a kind of a different stage in their journey. And I think we have to, try to understand as best we can that they're just at a different point in their lives than we are. And that's one of the most difficult things to kind of reconcile. And I totally get that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's especially though, like in my anxiety, I'll start to think, yeah, okay, I can understand them. It takes longer and all that, but all these animals are suffering, like at factory farms, all these, I'll just start to spiral like off into that and really feel the animals' pain, and it's so I want to learn how to just.
It's all about management, and I'll tell you something that my husband told me that really resonated with me, and it's kind of a mantra that I have to repeat to myself over and over and over. And he said to me, it was one of these days when I was crying, he says, you know what, Jen, you do more for animals in one day than most people do in a lifetime.
Yeah.
You make such a huge difference. Because I think a lot of us feel, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. You are so enough. You are doing so enough. And that's where the title, To Save a Starfish, came from. I don't know, are you familiar with the starfish story?
Yeah.
Yes. It makes a difference for that one. It really does. And we get so kind of weighted down by the negativity that it's really, we sort of lose focus. It's like watching the evening news. You think that, the world is just a terrible place. Well, that's because that's what you're exposed to on the evening news. And so sometimes, you need to take there's times I got to take a break from Facebook. There's times I got to take a break from signing petitions. I just,
right.
It's one thing to educate yourself, but to traumatize yourself, that's when you need to step back a little.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much for asking the question and for answering it.
Yes, thank you.
We have a couple of questions in the chat box. Maybe we'll go to those. I know that both Christine and Kristen seem to have their hand up in the queue. And Christine asked a question for Jennifer. What gives you hope at this point in your journey on the path here, and what helps you to not give in given the enormity of animal suffering? What she's kind of asking personally, what helps you?
Great question. Well, the two mantras that I shared, I remind myself of the starfish story, and I remind myself of what my husband said about, making a difference every day. And one of the biggest things that I do is I have eight rescued babies, furry babies. I hug my dogs. I hug my bunnies. I snuggle my bird. They keep me going, because each one of these critters that I have here, they were meant, they were meant to be euthanized, or they were meant to be, left out on the streets to die, or they were meant to end up in some pit bull fighting ring. Each of these little guys has stories and has made a difference in every one of their lives. And I just sometimes you got to look in their eyes and go, yeah, this is why I do this. But you got to take care of yourself so you can do it. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for answering that. I think those are important touchstones that we can remember. Yeah. And each of us probably has our own special ones too.
Definitely, and you also have to have some guilty pleasures. Do things that aren't animal related. I have a little guilty pleasure. Sometimes I like to watch marathon reruns of Cops. I have kind of a sick pleasure in watching people being arrested. So, watch a comedy. Just do something goofy. Get together with friends and just be goofy.
Oh, well, that's a really important thing that we forget is the power of laughter to heal and just to, help us get into the present moment. And exactly. I think there's one last question here I'd like to bring to your attention. This is like for folks. Kristen was sharing here that how to manage our memories of, for example, a time when we weren't, vegan or vegetarian or activist. Thinking back, remembering that we weren't, and how do we process that without feeling, guilty about it?
So, just so I understand the question, are you talking about looking back and not feeling guilty that you once maybe did eat meat or like that? Is that?
Yeah. That's my understanding, is that to get upset thinking about a time in early life before they were vegan or vegetarian, and just how to handle the feelings of knowing that they participated in that, standard American diet, or.
Yeah, what I was saying is, this is Kristen. What I was saying is, and it's probably partially linked to my OCD and such, but I find whenever I'm thinking about a time in my earlier life, like I've been veg since I was 14, vegan since I was 20, and I'm 31 now, so it was a long time ago, but I still have such feelings of guilt. Like, I could be thinking of something completely unrelated from, like, my childhood or, junior high or whatever, and I just, all that comes through in my head is the fact that I wasn't veg yet, and I have to, I have to put up a wall between that time and this time, because it's like, that's not who I am. And I don't know, I have residual guilt, and it's I'm here now. I'm vegan. I've been vegan for a long time. I do a lot to help animals, but I still have just it just upsets me a lot.
Have you forgiven yourself?
I don't think so. I think I'm on a life journey working on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have this sort of philosophy that, I'm trying to save more lives than those who were harmed in the time, of my life before I was veg. By helping other people to go vegan, by rescue, etc. And I think that's a pretty good goal.
Sure. I think there could be.
Excuse me, ladies. We're having a little echo. I'm just going to mute you, Kristen, just so we can get rid of the echo. Nothing personal. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So, I wonder if there's an element of grieving in there for you. I don't know how familiar you are with the stages of grief, Well, let me just run down this really, really quickly for you. So what we know about grief is, so generally first comes denial, and it's basically the brain's way of dealing with shock and trauma. And I think when it comes to issues like factory farming, a lot of people stay kind of in permanent denial. There's kind of this disconnect. I don't want to know about it, blah, 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 doesn't exist. Okay. Well, for those of us that get past that denial, we can typically go into bargaining or anger. Okay, we get really, really angry. After we get really angry, we typically go into sorrow. Okay, where we cry a lot. We're just really sad and depressed a lot, and then we typically go into acceptance. The problem with the grief stages and what hinders us through moving through them is guilt. Okay, so guilt is this pervasive thing that just kind of hovers over the ability to get through grief. And so I would just really encourage you to take a look at the grief that is involved in everything you're feeling, whether it's grief for the animals in factory farms or the grief for the animals in the circus or the grief for the animals that you once ate because that's just where you were in your journey, okay? So I would really address some of those grief issues around that and try to move through that guilt into acceptance. There's part of the serenity prayer that I say to myself, and it's, I don't know if I can say it off the top of my head. It goes something like, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I say that. I'm not a very religious person, but I say that every single night because I have a hard time with that, accepting things I cannot change. It's very, very hard for me.
Wow.
So I hope that answers your question to some degree.
Yeah, that's very just on point. I think what you shared. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and also for spending a little extra time with us this evening to answer some of these questions. And I hope that the question and answer was really helpful for some of the folks who are listening as well. And I appreciate you taking the time to really be present for each person and for the answer that you give. So
absolutely.
Wow,
I'm more than happy if you send me an email. If you have a question, I will definitely respond to that email as best as I can.
Well, it's been a true pleasure having you with us this evening to share your wisdom and knowledge about compassion fatigue and also just how to manage those feelings that we have. And I know that even more discussion is in your book. I've looked through it myself and I definitely recommend it. It's a workbook format. It's got so many tools. It's just jam-packed full of really interesting tools, and also really looking at, things that we do deal with as activists, such as how do we manage our anger around the often ignorant public. Sometimes that happens if we're, whether we're protesting or whether we're talking to friends and family. I just think that you've, since you had this experience, you knew exactly what to offer. And so, thank you for sharing today and also for your book, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the book is fairly new. It's hot off the press. So we're so lucky to be able to kind of preview some of the ideas here this evening. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
So
and again, someone mentioned on the chat, where is it available? It's going to be on Amazon. So whether you're in the U.S. or abroad, it should be on Amazon.com, and it's available for print or Kindle. And if you would like, by the way, if you would like an autographed copy with a little handwritten note, feel free to send me a message, and I'll send it directly to you.
Well, thank you for that wonderful gift, and also thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. Our next webinar is going to be on November 3rd, and our guest will be Matt Russell, who is an activist, and he actually was an undercover investigator, and he's going to share a little bit about how to manage our feelings when we have these sorts of extreme traumas that we witness and things like that. So I think it'll be a nice it'll play off of what you just shared today. We hope that you can all join us then, and just encourage everyone to continue this conversation. We have an activist support group that happens on the fourth Thursday of every month. It's online. It has a similar format where we can all talk to one another. And this month, I believe that will be it'll be on the 27th. So I hope you can join us then. Next week, we have artist and activist Linda Fisher, who's Native American. She's going to share her journey through vegan spirituality at the same time on our webinar. And hopefully I'll see some of you at the retreat this weekend. It will be wonderful to see some of you in person. Great. So I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, that you practice self-care, we try the deep breathing exercises, and thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. And special thanks, of course, to Jennifer Blough for just being you and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was an absolute honor.
Well, hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll definitely post the chat box notes online. They'll be probably in the Animal Activist online support group that we have. We'll try to also send them out to the people who participated this evening. So have a wonderful night, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. Take care. Good night, everyone. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Oh, good night.
Good night.